Black power, black power, black power. You know, I do believe that the world is controlled by Luciferian. You feel what I'm saying? All you gotta do is look around you. You know what I'm saying? Look what time we living in. And you agree with me that this world is controlled by Luciferian. There's so much evil being perpetrated up on the planet. You know what I mean? And 95% of the evil that happened up on the planet is because of one particular individual. You know, I'm banging on the beats tonight. I'm banging on the beats. I'm banging on the beats. You know, one particular individual, the disagreeable. You know what I'm saying? You know, the one that caused mass havoc on earth, the man of death. You know, the man they talk about in the book of Revelations, where you people who be into the scripture really don't know what the scripture really said, because the scripture was stolen from the original text. You know what I'm saying? From Kemet in Egypt. But to understand that white horse, and then where that white horse went, and that man that sat up on that white horse, you know what I'm saying? He took death with him. For you people who read the book of Revelation, it is talking about the Caucasian, the Neanderthal, you know what I mean? The fucking white man, the one who rules this world with death. He's the man of death. You feel me? He's Dr. Kevorkian on a whole motherfucking level. Y'all know who Dr. Kevorkian was? I think I'm saying it right. Dr. Kevorkian, the man of death, used to put people to death who didn't want to live no more because they had an illness that was going to take them out anyway. They was on the deathbed and they were suffering, and they wanted Dr. Kevorkian to take them out. You feel me? But see, this man of death that I'm talking about, no one has asked this man of death to take it upon himself to be one who says too many people on the planet. So what he runs is a depopulation run up on the planet. You feel what I'm saying? He wants to depopulate the fucking planet. This is Dr. Kevorkian on a whole motherfucking another level. You feel what I'm saying? But I'm gonna go right in tonight. This is Street Watching TV.
West Coast Bonanza.
If it's your first time fucking with my channel, man, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Mash up the likes. You know what I'm saying? And share the motherfucking video. One time for the streets, man. Man. This is Johnny Come Lately on this video. I've been meaning to come forward and put this video out, but other things keep happening in my life, other information that people sending me, so it's just, I gotta take my time and bring forth the videos that I want to bring forth. I want to be in the feeling, in the knowing. I want to be engrossed in the whole phenomenon of the particular subject that I want to bring forward. What y'all doing up here? Sit down somewhere. My dog came up in here in the studio. Sit down somewhere, man. Don't come up here messing with me, man. You want to go outside? That's what you want to do. You want to go outside in the middle of my video. Come here, boys. Come here. Come here. Come here. Come here. Come here. Get over here for the cameras. I want the cameras to see you. This here right here. This old Bolo. I guess he ready to come get me to take him outside. Come on, man, let's go. You wanna go outside? Come on. Be right back, y'all. Be right back. Come on. Peace, black from them back. They'll be bothering me in a minute. I'm about to stop the video. I'm not gonna let it run to let them back in because it's cold outside. You know, I'm living in the Midwest, so you know it's cold in this region. But with that being said, fam, I mean, I'm not just, you know, capping and being funny, but you have to admit there's something going on with the Neanderthal. You know, he can't live in peace with no one. He has to brutality the black population. Anytime he come in contact with black people, it's at our detriment. Then all of a sudden they got this situation with this COVID-19. Like I said, I believe that the COVID-19 virus is man-made, and I'm gonna leave that particular subject alone because I already made some videos speaking on that particular subject. So we're gonna move it right along and speak on the mainstream media. I mean, I have to drag them on certain particular situations, especially when I see something on TV and they speak on it, and I'll be wondering why they don't reveal a lot of things. It's not what they show on TV that's a conspiracy to me. It's what they don't reveal when they know the truth for certain things and they hide it. It's what they don't reveal. It's what they conceal and don't reveal. It's not that they may show a particular story on News Center 7 or CBS News or ABC World News. I'm not saying that there's false information there. It's not, like I told you, it's not what they don't reveal. It's the things they conceal. Like, for instance, I want to go to the Haiti situation because we did see the Haitians on the border of Texas out of Mexico. I don't know if they swam. I don't know how they get across the water, but anyway, it was in somehow, I guess Mexico and Haiti and all that stuff is close. I don't know, but the Haitians made it here and they got turned back as always. I can remember doing I think it was what administration was that? I want to say the Bush administration. I'm not for sure. Where they sent Haitians back when Haitians was I think that was during the 90. I want to be right. Now that's my dog barking. Hold on, y'all. Peace. It was 1992. Bush Sr. Sent Haitians back to Haiti after the USA government and French government made it possible for President Jean Aristide to be overthrown. You know, the American government in France and Canada, all the people in the Western world hate Haiti. This is why I tell you, it's not what the world news don't broadcast. I mean, it's like this. I'm gonna say this. They don't give up the full grasp of the story. That's what I'm trying to say. You feel me? The reason why the Western world hate Haiti because of Haiti's history with dealing with European people. We have to realize that slavery was happening in that region when it was called Santo Domingo, when it was held by the Spanish. The Spanish and the French fought over this island. You feel what I'm saying? That they came to a treaty to coexist with each other. But on one hand, France enslaved Africans to the island of what they call Haiti today. But in this heyday, it was called Santo Domingo. So this story You know, it's real, uh, it's a tragedy to white supremacy when they hear the story, and the people that lived in that time was very shaken by the Africans who rose up against their oppressors who were taken 9,000 miles from Africa and come to the Western world to work in a slave plantation atmosphere. You feel what I'm saying? And the life expectancy of an African in Haiti was only 3 years. This is how harsh the Eurocentric man treated our people. It was harsh labor. You feel what I'm saying? It was painful. But one African that they sent to this particular region from Jamaica, name was Duddy Bootman. You have to study Duddy Bootman of the Revolutionary War with the French army and Napoleon and the boys. You feel what I'm saying? Fam, this was a well-kept secret from us that came up in school. No one has this history in their history book. You have to research it for yourself. See, when I talk about mainstream media, the stories that they reveal may have some true concrete evidence there. I'm not saying that they show fake news. It's what they don't reveal. When they tell a story about a particular situation, they never give you the flip side. You feel me? That's all I'm saying. So when you hear me talk about Fox, CBS, all those outlets are owned by the enemy of the darker people of the planet. That's just how it is. They're not going to tell the truth what's really going on. The American government is not going to tell you the truth when they go overseas and commit all these atrocities against humanity. They don't tell you how they act when they go overseas. Every once in a while, you might get a USA military personnel person, get a tribunal court and go to jail for something they did real horrific against another particular people. Because we know when they invaded Iraq that the American soldiers raped a lot of the women and killed a lot of Iraqi children. You feel what I'm saying? Same thing they did in Vietnam. You know what I'm saying? America been violent everywhere she been. America's been violent everywhere she's been. You feel what I'm saying? Everywhere America's went, she's been violent. Everywhere the European went, the fucking Neanderthal been violent. In '92, President Bush dealt with the Haitians very deadly. It was a scenario that the Haitians are backward people and they can't get up on their feet. So the American government and all his cronies, they work together to interwoven in the fabric of that nation and keep that nation poor, because in 1791, this African that was sent from Jamaica that was enslaved by the British, and he was sold off into slavery into what they call Haiti today, but sent to Tamiko in his heyday. Duddy Bootman, they sent him there, and he rose up against his oppressors with 80,000 African people. They all rose up. It sends shockwaves through the Western world. Slave masters in this country was very terrified that the revolution will light up like a wildfire. They didn't want the slaves in this country to get wind of a black republic. From 1791 to 1804, the black man and the black woman of Haiti killed French people, fought off so many wars, and had its independence. The only black republic in the Western Hemisphere. You feel what I'm saying? You got to understand when the Spaniards came into Santo Domingo, the Native American that lived in that particular region was annihilated. You feel what I'm saying? They non-exist, so they bring Africans in. 80,000 strong. Went from plantation to plantation, killing Frenchmen. You know, Daddy Bootman ended up getting killed, you know, for causing this uprising by France. You know, they chopped his body up, they did him, you know, real bad, but the revolution kept going on with Toussaint L'Ouverture. People pronounce it different, just like Santo Domingo. People will pronounce it different when you hear it come out their mouth. You feel me? I'm not French. You feel what I'm saying? I'm not French. I'm really not English, but I speak English because my ancestors was forced to speak this particular language. So if you hear me not pronouncing certain words right, it's because I got a heavy tongue like a real African. You feel what I'm saying? Plus, I got my tooth knocked out right here. You feel me? So it makes my words sound a little funny. So it's not that I'm illiterate, just I gotta learn how to talk with the front tooth out. You feel what I mean? Dig. But then our people get hit with these calamities, you know what I mean? 2010 with a powerful earthquake, then one just recently in 2021, another powerful earthquake. You feel what I mean? Like 21 years later, you know, that number 22, 21 is a very significant number in the Revolutionary War of Haiti against the Frenchmen. Toussaint L'Ouverture, he rose up after Daddy Bootman was executed. You feel what I'm saying? By the French. Now this brother here raised war. Then you had another brother, Jean Dessalines. I want to say it right because I'm not French. Jean Dessalines. Now Dessalines was a revolutionary. You feel what I'm saying? Then you had another brother named Henry Christopher. You know what I'm saying? He got a battle-like building where they waged war from this building. It's like a frontier, like a barrack that he had built. You ought to see that in Haiti, man. It's like it's like a castle, but you can shoot cannonballs out of it. You know what I'm saying? And this is how they defeated France, with guerrilla warfare. Hey, what you doing up here? Now my dog back up here. I gotta go let my other dog in. Y'all hold up. Sit down, boy. Sit down. I gotta take him out of here. Yeah. Yeah, you know, you gotta check Haiti out. Do the real research on Haiti. You know, it's easy to look up Haiti, the real revolution. The greatest revolution that was ever fought on the American soils. You talk about the Civil War. The Civil War, hey, that war was never dramatic as the war that happened that was kept from black people. You never heard about this war. It's people today, only thing they go off of what CBS is saying about how bad Haiti is and how backwards they is. They can't get on their feet economically, but it's always a reason for that. I don't want to be all over the place, but I was talking about calamities with earthquakes. We know that the Neanderthal got a thing called HAARP, where they can control the weather. And it's not by accident that these same calamities keep hitting Haiti. When I tell you about how the Neanderthal, don't forget about how they was defeated. The motherfucking Neanderthal has not forgot how Africans walked them up out of Africa in the Middle East and put them in the caves of Europe. They haven't forgot about that. But when we as a people, we'd have been the ones downtrodden for 400 years since we came in contact with this motherfucking crazy ass, retarded ass Neanderthal, and we forgive them because they give you a religion and tell you forgive them. They got a motherfucking machine called heart. If you don't believe me, look it up. They can control the motherfucking weather. This is how wicked these beasts is, and this is how advanced in technology these motherfuckers have gotten. These motherfuckers, little motherfucking bullshit you get every day, cell phones, computers, whatever little gadgets that you may have, that shit is like old as fuck compared to the shit they working on right now they got in existence. Trust and believe me, these motherfuckers working on artificial intelligence, motherfucker. For real, man, these motherfuckers on some other shit. You know, but with that being said, I don't want to be all over the place, because I did say something about the earthquakes. They be 7.2 on the fucking Richter scale. 7.2 magnitude on the fucking Richter scale. You feel me? In 2010 and 2021, these motherfuckers had this goddamn heart machine pointed towards our brothers and sisters in Haiti. Trust and believe, these Neanderthals blew the motherfucker up. You know what I'm saying? The land up. Make it a fucking earthquake. Because they can control the motherfucking weather. Trust and believe me. Conspiracy theory, my motherfucking ass. You feel me? I know what time it is. Motherfuckers say what they want to say about me. You know. I do my research. I don't trust this motherfucker. This is a retarded motherfucker. This is the man of motherfucking death. And this is where we bang on the beast. You know what I'm saying? Any fucking way. Why do the Western world and hates Haiti? See, we have to go to the very essence of a particular problem to bring about a resolution, or at least expose the culprit to the problem. America and all of Europe hate Haiti. As long as white supremacy stay in power, Haiti will suffer. First of all, Haiti is discriminated against because of its inhabitants are African. Most of all, the revolution history that sent shockwaves fear throughout the white man's world. It was a very terrifying moment in the white man's slavery history. This is something that I wrote because it came to my mind. I'm like, man, this is why they really hate Haiti when I did my research. You feel me? I mean, once upon a time, Haiti was a rich colony. You feel me? After the slave trade that happened there, because the slave trade had so much money invested by France. France was making so much money. They had over 15,000 slave plantations in Haiti. 15,000 slave plantation, coffee, sugar, and it was something else I forgot. Indigo, whatever that is, indigo. These three products made France one of the strongest, wealthiest countries in the world. Sugar, you know, sugar is a delicacy in the world at that time. It was like cocaine to these people in a sense, because they went crazy because the European never had sugar until he visited Africa. You feel what I'm saying? And the ground's so fertile in Haiti, you can grow the sugar. And this is why the Africans was imported into what we now call Haiti today. This killing of the slave master crippled France's economy. 80,000 Africans rose up under Dutty Bootman and annihilated, massacred thousands of Frenchmen. These battles went on from 1791 to 1804. Fast forward, this revolution that happened really caused shockwaves through the Western world. Everybody did not want to recognize Haiti as a black republic, independent colony, because she was black. And what she did to Europeans, the Europeans were very ego broken. Their spirit was broken that these Africans defeated a well-equipped military. You got to understand, the France have more military might. So with that being said, after they lost the war, you know that Africans got that military. You feel me? I mean, the military's weapons. So it was really hard to beat well-trained Africans who use voodoo as a method, calling on the spirit of the ancestor to help them win these battles. So that's why I'm engrossed in the Haitian culture, you know, because I know some of us are Christians and we call on Jesus, and it seems like we get no help. And that was a religion that was forced upon us by our open enemy, the slave master, made us Christians. It's the story of why Haiti is economically deprived, because you got to understand, Thomas Jefferson in his day, he put like a embargo or sanction on Haiti. So Haiti couldn't make any money. You know, Haiti used to make a lot of money from fruit, all this imports. You know, after they won their independence, Haiti was independent. They could make money. 26. Okay, come on. I'm gonna make this right. Make this right. I think 22 years later, I want to make this right. 1804 was a year that the Africans defeated France all the way and threw France out of Haiti. Haiti comes back 20-something years later with about 10,000 soldiers that had licked their wounds, that it got strong. Haiti is being crippled around the world where she can't make money with these sanctions being put up on her. So Napoleon and the boys come back and tell the Haitians to sing ill overture on the boys if you want to be independent and be recognized in the world and not to be invaded by France and the rest of the European world, you have to pay reparations. Yeah. These motherfucking beasts gave a proposition to my people in Haiti that if you don't take this reparations for us, which is France saying that Haiti owes France reparations for killing all the Frenchmen, destroying all the plantations, because you know Africans set fire to all the plantations. There was 15,000 plantations in Haiti, and every last one of those plantations was burnt to the ground. A tag of $21 billion in reparations had to be paid to France in order for Haiti to be recognized as an independent republic, black republic, and also avoid an invasion, another war. You feel what I'm saying? Fast forward to Saint El Overture, the general that defeated Napoleon. He tried to be diplomatic with the Neanderthal. The Neanderthal tricked him into a diplomatic meeting that's supposed to happen in France. Napoleon traveled, to St. Overture, he traveled to France. As soon as he got there, they arrested the brother and put him in jail and starved him to death. You can never trust the pale Neanderthal. You never trust your enemy. That was Napoleon. That was to St. Overture's fault. He didn't know the nature of this beast. This beast is never diplomat when it comes to black people. And that's fast forward to 2021. We just so in love and so infatuated with smiles and gestures from the people who hate us. It's sad to see. And I'm not talking about all white people. I'm talking about white people in power. Like the news networks, the fucking presidents, the politicians. This shit is deep. The black politicians. You know, them are the gatekeepers. This shit is all ran from a Luciferian mindset. And you got to understand, when I talk about the mainstream media, it's not what they show on the news, what the stories that they are reporting, is the things they don't reveal. It's the things they conceal that they know. And when they do a particular story, they never tell you or give you the full insight. They only give you a one-sided view. And that's not true. That's not the way things work. You got a right hemisphere and a left hemisphere brain. You just can't get things one-sided. You got two eyes. You feel what I mean? So you got to be able to fully scope the whole fucking story, put it up on a microscope, and let's investigate. You feel? Let's see what we can see. So when I be talking about the mainstream media, people like, there you go. It's not what they reveal, it's what they conceal and what they don't reveal. So when they talk about Haiti not very being a backwards ass colony of black people who can't seem to get on their feet because Western world's always inside of Haiti. Why is you inside of Haiti causing all this havoc? So they put an embargo on a colony so they can't make money. Then France come back, give them an ultimatum, be invaded, and if you don't take this offer, we will invade you and you will not be recognized as a black republic. So the 21 billion reparation was paid from 1804 to 1942. But check the trickery out. This drained Haiti because anything that was imported from Haiti into France, France got it at a 50% discount. So made it harder for Haiti to pay back or pay the reparations. I don't understand that. Blacks in this country was beat down, lynched, burned at the stake, built this country, made America what it is today. We still have been paid reparations. In Haiti, the Africans do what they had to do to get the motherfucker oppressor off his neck by killing up the oppressor. You know what I'm saying? Pushing the oppressor up out of Haiti. You feel what I'm saying? They did what they did, won their independence, but they owe France reparation. What kind of shit is that? Every time you deal with this snake, this Neanderthal, this evil being up on our fucking planet, they always fuck people. They done fuck the world. You feel what I'm saying? So, this is why they hate Haiti. Haiti can't make no money. You feel what I'm saying? So, as Haiti paying back this humongous debt, you feel what I'm saying? They constantly loaning Haiti money to pay back the debt. So they get deeper in debt, and everybody puts an embargo on Haiti where she can't make money. This is what the wicked Western world do. So black people, when you see your brothers and sisters from Haiti, and they got them looking like they discombobulated, they don't know what they doing, leave the African alone, let the African make money. Why you always there, Canada? Why you always there, France, USA government? The government, this government right here is so wicked. I remember when they ousted Aristide, pulled a coup to get him up out of there. During the Bush and the motherfucking Bush administration, Jean Aristide, the president of Haiti, I remember this government removed him, kidnapped him. I believe that was during the Clinton administration, you can look it up, or Bush Senior administration. This government went and kidnapped this motherfucker, took him to Africa, and somehow he was restored, and then they, the government, this government in the Western world, I think it was France and America, staged a coup to get Aristide back out in '92. I think something like that. Something like that. You got to look it up. I know he was kidnapped by this government. And every president in Haiti, if it didn't buy by the rules that America and the rest of the Western world push it up on it, what they would do, they would just simply have the president executed. You feel what I'm saying? When I say money is a root to evil, when your enemy has it all, it can also pay your own people to rise up against you when you're in power. So that's what's been going on in Haiti since it's been in existence. Since Haiti was in existence for its independence, white Western world has contributed to the downfall of Haiti. So when your ass see Haiti fucked up, think about the Western white man did this. The Western world did this. The Europeans did this. And I'm gonna show and prove. That's all I do. I'm gonna show and prove. It's time to show and prove.
West Coast Menances.
There's nothing that happens after the Haitian Revolution and our fight for freedom across the Caribbean and North and South America that wasn't influenced by the Haitian Revolution.
The African people on the island fought all the largest armies of the world at the time and won over each one of them. Whooped the Spaniards, beat up the French, knocked down the British.
The Haitians have a pride about them. The revolution is the most important thing to them. The first thing they instill in you is that you are the first Black Republic.
1804 becomes important because it's the date at which the implementation of the dream of real revolution and real equality and new nation status and the ability to defend your new nation is manifest.
When you look at modern historians, when they talk about victories that Europeans had over non-white people, they always frame the narrative as victories. But when African people rise up and fight off their European oppressors, they frame the narrative as a massacre.
Africans everywhere that were enslaved resisted it. Haiti becomes significant because it was the first time in human history that an enslaved population actually overthrew their oppressors.
The Haitian Revolution, though, was the most organized, the most large scale, the most impressive in terms of structure and complication from the very beginning.
Haiti made more money for France than all 13 colonies.
The Haitian Revolution was very influential, particularly amongst Africans. It was seen as an inspiration for Africans in this hemisphere, just as it was seen as a horror by those who held slavery dear.
There is a concept that we must defeat Haiti. We must ground them into the ground. We can never let them rise. They are an example of Black power. They are an example of what happens when people who are oppressed decide to stop being oppressed.
The island of Hispaniola is one of the oldest islands in the Western Hemisphere. The island is very strategic because it has a lot of natural resources, it has a lot of precious metals, and a lot of the European powers were scrambling to get control of that area.
Haiti is the first place that Christopher Columbus did a fort, did a settlement. So it's the first settlement in the Americas.
Christopher Columbus on the west coast of Africa in 1482. He's involved with Africans on the west coast. That is how he came to America in the first place. It was they who told him there was land to the west. In fact, in his journals, he says that he met Africans going back to Africa when he was on his way to America.
What folks are doing these days shows that there were Africans on that island when Columbus got there. At least 3 different types. There were the Caracoles up in the north, Guanini, and there's another one. But you can find that in the book called The Annals of Haiti.
The Spanish declared this was for them, but the French says, what do you mean this is for you? And the British said, well, how could you have it all? So right from the beginning, we had colonial wars among them on the island.
When you're dealing with the Spaniards, you're looking at the introduction of Africans in 1503. When you're looking at the introduction of Africans from the French, you're looking at 1670. So you're looking at a wide gap between the Spaniards and the French bringing Africans onto this island. But what happened on that island was that they brought a culture that was deeply steeped in what is probably the most important liberating force that any human can have, and that is in spirituality.
1675, the Treaty of Ryswick, the church established that the island would be split in 2. One side would be for the Spaniards, and the other side would be for the French. So at that point, what the Spaniards had named the island, I told you, was already Haiti. That's the original name of the island. Now, the Spaniards named the island Hispaniola. And when they agreed to share it with French, the French called their side Saint-Domingue, and the Spaniards kept Hispaniola for theirs, but called the capital city Santo Domingo, which is still Saint-Domingue.
When the Spanish got here in 1492, and you know, they're on the island from 1492 to 1625, the Spanish is looking for gold. They're looking for wealth, and this is the first thing they started doing. And they find some gold. Haiti still produces gold today. And so gold was the big prize that everybody's looking for. But once they get into sugarcane was sweet gold. I mean, sugarcane was it.
During the period where they were commencing this genocide against the indigenous population, a priest called Bartholomew de las Casas came up with this idea that it was ungodly to do what they were doing to the indigenous people of Hispaniola. They were killing them off. It was terrible, which it was, incredibly brutal. So they needed someone else to do it to. And this was where he came up with the idea of getting people from elsewhere.
This revolution was going on from the moment Africans touched the shores. That's very important to understand, because what also happened is that when Africans were brought to this island, many of the warriors from the Congo, from Yoruba, or what we call Nigeria, or from Ghana, when they were brought here, the Ashanti, they immediately escaped and created maroon towns. These maroon towns would later become the actual hubs of the revolutions, because many of them never really experienced being enslaved. The great majority of sugar that was consumed in Europe came from that part of the world, came from that island. The coffee that went to Europe came from that island.
That colony that the Spanish founded, taken by the French, eventually became the most profitable colony in the Americas, and arguably, depending on which economist you consult, the most profitable colony in the world at the time. It became the centerpiece of the transatlantic slave system. It became what gave France its supremacy over Britain in the 18th century. I mean, this island, it's impossible to overstate the economic importance of the island in the period we're talking about. It produced more profit than all of North America combined.
This was a wealth that was largely born by sugar, which was not only an item used to sweeten your tea and coffee, but it was also a marker of class. It was seen as a sign of sophistication when one used sugar. And in certain circles, it was even seen as a miracle drug of some sorts. And that helped to generate tremendous amounts of wealth on the island of Hispaniola, which is one of the reasons why the French, ultimately backed by the United States, fought so fiercely to retain that island.
I mean, the life expectancy in Jamaica or Haiti, for example, was often between 3 and 7 years. So once you arrived on the island, you were worked to death on average between 3 and 7 years. I mean, it's genocide. And so that was what contributed, the type of torture. Because the white population was so much smaller than, say, on mainland America, vis-a-vis the black population, the paranoia was worse. And therefore the types of punishment, the types of torture, the extremity of the slave regime was much more severe in the Caribbean.
Taking pregnant women, crucify them, split their belly open enough so they will have a game. People are gonna bet who's gonna die first, the baby or the mother.
The reason why there was more rebellions in Jamaica and in the Caribbean in general is a number of factors. One, conditions were much worse. And I don't say that in any way to denigrate or downplay how brutal conditions were in America, but we can see this from the fact that the slavery was so bad in the Caribbean that the populations were not even able to reproduce themselves. So constantly new populations had to be brought from Africa.
And one of the things they used to do is bury us alive on an anthill, leaving your head so that you would slowly get tortured to death by ants eating your skull.
First of all, let's be clear, the rebellions against slavery started in Africa. And the rebellions against slavery in Africa are probably the most under-discussed and underrepresented element of the whole history. Everyone tells you that Africans collaborated, which is true. What they don't tell you about is those Africans that rebelled. And in fact, scholars estimate now, that it has been studied thoroughly, that the rebellions in Africa alone, of which there were hundreds, prevented perhaps 1 million people from crossing the Atlantic.
And one of the ways the planters kept control of Haiti was either to rape or have a child with a black woman, and then send that child to Europe to be educated, and then bring them back, and they became the overseers.
But all Africans that were enslaved understood that their natural state of being human was to be free in Africa. Those two things always went together.
In the Caribbean, because there was a concentration of sugar plantations, which was the most brutal form of slavery, worse than cotton or indigo or coffee or tobacco, it was the most labor intensive. And also the number of Africans versus the number of Europeans was much higher in the Caribbean. And then you have, of course, terrain. So island like Jamaica, island like Haiti, very mountainous, lend themselves to guerrilla warfare. Then you have strange political coincidences. So like during the years preceding the Haitian Revolution, there was a civil war in Africa in the Congo. So a lot of the Africans, Congolese, that ended up being Maroons in Haiti were African war veterans. They were militarily trained personnel back in Africa.
With the Haitian Revolution, there were 4 principal players in regards to the leadership of the Haitian Revolution. The first one was Mackandal.
Mackandal is considered to be the precursor to the 1791 beginning, because Mackandal was an enslaved African who worked at a plantation, and then he died in 1757 or 1758, but he freed himself. Right? Some people say that, you know, he had lost one arm in a sugar mill accident. But essentially, the legend of Mackandal is interesting because he foretold what would happen with regards to the Haitian Revolution.
He was this extraordinary herbalist. And what he did, he taught the people of Haiti, the Africans, how to use the herbs and fauna in the ecology that they're now in to poison the food of the white farmers. And he was very successful.
And so Mackandal went, took to the hills, and he would teach the kitchen people how to poison their masters.
They had nature on their side, and that's very important. They used nature as one of their greatest weapons. They knew the terrain, they understood the terrain, they understood botany, they understood toxicology, they understood poisons, they understood, and that's what Voodoo is. Voodoo is a science. Voodoo is not just a spiritual system.
The Bafioti means the black collaborators. They had to get them out of their face first. Mackandal, what he's really known, a lot of what he went after them first. Before he poisoned the European, he poisoned the black collaborators. They were all in the house Negroes, come on.
And one thing about Mackandal, he realized this. He understood that the black collaborators, we call them coons today, how they will sabotage black progress in order to get individual trinkets. So Mackendall, he saw that early on. So when it came to poisoning the white supremacists, Malcolm Dahl, he understood that we gotta get rid of these collaborators first. So he poisoned many of the black collaborators before he started to poison the white slave owners.
If you look at the statutes, the laws of a place like Georgia in the 1750s, contemporaneous with that revolt on Hispaniola, you'll find laws that are specifically seeking to restrain Africans from getting knowledge of plants because it was feared that they had in mind a plot or a conspiracy similar to what unfolded in what is now Haiti in the 1750s.
See, African people used strategies that they knew would work. Mackendall, another great revolutionary, he poisoned the French. And the women were the ones that poisoned them when they would prepare foods. He killed over 6,000 European Frenchmen.
When the enslaved Africans were finished with their work, he went down to talk to them. Like, he would always go down and talk to them. And at one night, he took out 3 handkerchiefs. A yellow handkerchief, a white handkerchief, and a black handkerchief. And he said to the audience, in terms of storytelling, because that's how we give information through stories. So he took out the first handkerchief, and he said to the enslaved Africans, first handkerchief was yellow. He says, these are the people that owned this island before Columbus came. And they were totally annihilated. Then he took out the white. He says, the white handkerchief, these are the folks that, annihilated the Tainos. And then he took out the black handkerchief, and this is the prophecy. He says, we, Africans, are going to avenge the Taino folks, and we're going to get these white folks out of Haiti.
And so Mackendall used his science, and I think he was a kind of pharmacologist in modern terms, but he used his science of understanding the natural world to begin to talk about how do we take that knowledge and free ourselves. And Mackendall, he's sort of the spark of the Haitian Revolution.
When you look at many of the people coming up out of this system, for instance, Mackendall was a preacher. And Mackendall was a preacher who told his people and the people around him that he had visions. There's such a connection between Mackendall and Nat Turner as it relates to the work that they were doing.
Mackendall understood the problem with the collaborators, and unfortunately, it was a black collaborator who turned Mackendall in, who turned on him. And the French captured Mackendall, and they were going to burn him alive. When Mackendall was about to die, he made a very strange prediction. Mackendall said, I'm coming back as a mosquito. Now, a lot of people didn't know what that meant. Years later, when the French came to invade the island, there was a certain number of French troops, thousands of them, who were killed by malaria brought on by mosquitoes. Now, the malaria skipped over the Africans because they were immune to the malaria. But the Mackendall prediction definitely came true. That just showed how spiritually in touch they were.
The next Haitian leader who was instrumental in the Haitian Revolution was a voodoo priest from Jamaica named Duddy Bookman.
So Bookman appears to be one of these persons who's leading resistance in Jamaica. The British, not wanting to martyr him, sells him to the French in Haiti because the French is known for breaking black folk. Jamaica was supposed to be the place where that was done, but the French is supposed to be really strategic at this and good at this.
Bookman is the child of a woman whose name I don't have yet, who was a big-time revolutionary in Jamaica. And her son was sold to Saint-Domingue as punishment to the mother. So he was about 13, 14 when he was sold over here. And they seem to have been Muslims. He talks a lot about the Quran. And in fact, he's named Bookman because he had a small Quran tied to his waist. And at some point, they realized that. And when he refused to give it to the colonizers and enslavers, they burnt the book on him, with him. So he was all burnt up. And then to mock him, named him Bookman.
Bookman and another enslaved African woman named Cecilia Fatima began the planning stages of the revolution. They went around the island and they organized a Congress to participate in the infamous Bois Cayman voodoo ceremony that occurred in an alligator swamp.
Cecile Fatima had gone around for about 4 years to bring that Congress together. She had gone around the whole entire island to bring that Congress together.
And as much as many people talk about that meeting in the alligator swamp, that Bookman called for the prayer, but it wasn't Bookman that called that congregation together, and it wasn't done in an instant. It was months of organizing and building up. And the person who was leading this organization was a mambo, a female priestess by the name of Cecilia Fatima.
It should not be seen as surprising that some of the leading figures of the revolutionary process were said to be either believers or practitioners of this New World belief system that we refer to as Vodun or Voodoo.
I like to share with my students. Think about what master you must have if you decide to hold your meeting in a swamp of alligators.
This kind of going so far as to take the life of your oppressor is already there. And the place where that meeting took place, the alligator swamp, that was a place the whites didn't go in because there were really alligators up in there. So very few people could go in there and come out. But the black folks had a different relationship with the ecology than whites had. They mastered having this relationship. The whole concept of the Yoruba religion is to know and understand the forces of nature.
When you're trying to get free, it's very important to create your own identity. When you want to oppress somebody, the thing you do, you change their name, you change their religion, you change their language. And the Haitians understood that they needed their own language. This is why they speak the French Creole. That's a form of their own language. They knew that they had to go back to their own religion. They went back to voodoo. And there were people who were Catholic, there were people who were Christian, there were people who were different religions, but they went back to voodoo, and that codified everybody.
It was an African spiritual force that brought the people together. And when African people were brought together, it gave them a common goal. When they had a common goal, then they knew the common enemy, and then they would take care of their own business.
And voodoo is not just a religion. I mean, Africans didn't really have religions. They had a way of life that at best you can call their sacred science in dealing with cosmology and ecology.
Intentionality was to make our stuff so fearful and so evil and so scary that we run away from it. You know, and so all you gotta say is that, you know, when I was growing up, if I met a young lady and I asked her where she's from, she said she's from Louisiana, I'd be backing off. Oh, she might know voodoo. You know, she'll put something in my soup. She could do some people. See, that just make us afraid of our own stuff.
We ain't talking about no Dracula movies here, no zombies. We're basically talking about Africanism. We're talking about people that understand the strengths of plants and of nature and how to, you know, outwit your militia by using what the gods have provided you on this earth.
So you call upon lowers to meet the task that you're confronted with. If you're engaging in war, you would call upon a lower that has the characters and qualities and dispositions of being warlike or strong and strength and fearless.
Dying was an opportunity to go back to the ancestors, to Guinea, right? So there was no fear.
Through science and through faith and through the will of not fearing death. Most Haitians don't fear death. They don't.
A lot of Haitians, they say don't fear death. So when you look at a lot of rappers now, a lot of rappers here in America, they will have Haitian gangsters in their entourages. And a lot of these dudes will have that Haitian muscle behind them. So this just shows the kind of respect and even fear that a lot of people still have for that Haitian rebel.
I mean, imagine if you're not scared of death, you're not going to be a good slave. And this is one of the reasons Christianity preached suicide is a sin. Yeah? One of the reasons that you get your reward in the afterlife, but only if you're a good slave.
It really is a science of the spirit. And that this voodoo that they demonized, the demonization of it was intentional because they wanted to separate us from the very thing that gave us power.
Let's be clear, a lot of African spiritual systems believed in what we call the transmigration of the soul. So they believe that the soul is eternal. This was very problematic for people you want to enslave. Again, coming back to before we even get to Haiti, in Africa itself, there are copious records among Europeans writing about slavery of Africans jumping in the sea. I'd rather dead than be a slave. Consistent. And particular groups, so the Igbo of Nigeria, who are a group that very much believed in the transmigration of the soul, they were one of the groups that it's recorded by Europeans were most likely to commit suicide because they believed they'd be reborn in Africa. They believed that their soul lived forever, so I'd rather die than this stuff.
There is a cultural, spiritual unity that unites Africans and it gives them power. Even today, in the African American community, it is the church that is the most powerful. And when anybody wants to sway the people, they always bring pastors in because they understand the pastors have the ear of the congregation and the people in the community.
We don't know shocking when you said rise of the dead when we talk about Jesus Christ. You know, they say they can have Jesus rising, we can have my mama rising.
I had a heart attack some years ago, about 7 years ago, something called ventricular tachycardia. Heart beating too fast, it won't stop because I'm always doing stuff, you know. And they couldn't figure out what was wrong with me. So finally they came one morning and said, Mr. Small, we're gonna bring in the electrician. So I said, you know, y'all full of joke. He said, oh no, we're gonna bring in the electricians. Because they have doctors who are human electricians. And their job is to measure the electrical current that goes from your brain to your heart and to your other organs, and to look at the relationship to the electrical current in your body and how much is it being interfered with from things outside of your body. Does that sound like voodoo to you? So that's what voodoo is talking about. And while on one hand we deny it when we talk about voodoo, but here in our highest science, it is proven to be reality.
So the Africans had absolutely no fear because they knew that this was a transformation, that it is how you live that matters, not how you die.
The concept of zombies comes from Vodun. It's an African concept, and it's not about the living dead, it's about worshiping the ancestors, praising the ancestors, but the white supremacists, they flip that into something demonic where people are gonna come out the ground and walk around and get you. And that's that boogeyman concept that they've created because of the Haitians rising up and getting revenge. And that's always been a scary thing for the white supremacists, African people rising up, getting revenge on them. That's the zombie mentality that they've created because that's their fear. When you look at the old zombie movies back in the 1920s and 30s and 40s, they would actually use Africans and Haitians as zombies.
And out of their West Indian island comes a tale of terror and voodoo, of witchcraft and zombies, and all the weird black magic that the white man seldom sees.
All of those old zombie movies had voodoo themes, so they were very open about it then.
You see, the thing about Duddy Boukman was he was so intelligent, he knew that he might not get it, because he did get captured and he was executed. But the revolution continued with the people. And that's another lesson I learned about the Haitian Revolution. It wasn't so much the leaders, it was the people. The people never gave up the spirit. To this very day, they still have the spirit.
Boukman is known for 3 or 4 things. Number 1 is the Boukman's prayer. You know, the God who created the earth, who created the sun that gives us light, the God that watches us from the clouds, the God that holds up the ocean. Our God has seen what the white man has done to us. Our God wants us to do good. The God of the white man wants him to do crimes. It's our God who will give us the strength and the courage to beat this white man.
So now this is the man who's going to rise from this. This thing is going to rise and say to us on August 14, 1791, the God who created the world, who make the waves move in the ocean, he is your Father. He is with you and will give you his strength, but you must act and free yourself.
Duddy Boukman is very intelligent. He is one of the leaders of the African people. He's very respected. And what he's going to do is he's going to devise a plan. And he is going to incorporate the ceremony of Ogun, the god of war. And he is going to assemble the forces. And he is going to instill in them a spirit of revolution.
And the last sentence is a pretty long thing. In the last sentence, he says, listen to the voice of freedom. It speaks in each one of your hearts. When they ask him, but who will lead us in this battle? He says, the leader is inside you. You are the general, and you are the soldier. Now get to it.
He comes from the form of just total understanding of what war is. There is no conceptual framework of peace. You don't call on Ogun for peace. You don't call on him for negotiation. You call on him when everything has been done that you've tried to do. You've been as diplomatic as you possibly can. But now it's time to get busy.
I have not seen anywhere where there's some text in voodoo that says, forgive and forget.
Black people and African people globally, we have this Jedi mind trick that's ran on us by the white supremacists where they can mistreat, subjugate, maldistribute the resources, harm, and oppress, and then tell us we should forgive them because this passage in the Bible says so. And that's a trick that African people have been falling for a long time. And the Haitian people, they didn't fall for that. They went to their old spiritual system. They went to African spiritual systems. They went to the voodoo. And in voodoo, there is no concept of forgiveness. And that's the thing that scared the white supremacists. And we got to stop falling for their mind tricks when they harm and oppress us and then tell us to forgive them. We got to start thinking in terms of our African spiritual systems and in terms of survival.
So we meet in those different places in the forest. And one question has to be debated. What can we do so our children and our grandchildren do not have to suffer what we're suffering here? And this is the night the decision was taken. There is no two ways. This man only understands force. So only with force can we talk back to him. And some people started saying, well, but we don't have boats, we don't have guns, we don't have this, we don't have that. And one of the answers that was given is God has never created a creature and not give you a way to fight. You sit on a stone, it is a tool while it's holding your body. But when you are attacked, you have your weapon under your butt. Use it.
When it comes to guerrilla warfare, and this is what the Haitian Revolution is a lesson in, we have to understand how guerrilla warfare works. When you're going up against a superpower, you can't go head up. You have to attack the flanks. You have to attack from the back. And you have to learn how to weaponize everything. So the Haitians, they learn how to weaponize nature, weaponize rocks, weaponize trees, weaponize animals. Understand that, because when they had the first voodoo ceremony, they had that in an alligator swamp. Now, they knew that the white supremacists weren't going to no alligator swamp, but they were just so in touch with nature, they knew they needed to weaponize everything.
Once you get to the point where you're going to do this, what you're actually doing is you are bringing the god of war within you. And every one of us as human beings has the god of war in us. We many times tried to keep it down.
The War Council was August 14th. They decided the revolution would start a week from there. A lot of those Africans did not speak the same language. They all came from different spaces, and a lot of them didn't know how to count. When would the revolution start? Each were given, this is another, I do this also, each were given 7 stones, everybody at Boakaima. And then they went back to their spaces, the plantation. Every morning, they were supposed to let one go. When there was no more stones in your hand, then kupetet bulikai, burned it all down.
Pat Robertson said that the devil was conjured up by the Haitians, and they had a devil-worshiping ceremony, and the devil killed all the French and killed all the whites on the island, which is a lie, by the way. They did not kill all the white people on the island. That's another big propaganda lie that they like to promote.
Something happened a long time ago in Haiti, and people might not want to talk about it. They were under the heel of the French. you know, Napoleon III and whatever. And they got together and swore a pact to the devil. They said, we will serve you if you'll get us free from the French. It's a true story. And so the devil said, okay, it's a deal. And they kicked the French out. You know, the Haitians revolted and got themselves free. But ever since, they have been cursed by one thing after the other, desperately poor.
Pat Robertson said that Satan came up, killed all the white people, and the Haitians have been cursed ever since. And that just shows how racially insecure do you have to be. You would rather give props to Satan. You would rather give credit to Satan than a group of African people who really put in the work and got rid of the French.
The night originally chosen to start the Haitian Revolution. So we remember the Haitian Revolution, August the 22nd, August the 23rd, right? The original plan was to start on the 24th. The reason the 24th was chosen was because on the 25th, the entire government was meeting the next day. So the ambition from the beginning was to kill the entire government and take over the island. The only reason the revolution had to start earlier, the rebellion had to start earlier, was because on the 21st, somebody struck early. And slave masters captured someone, tortured someone, and were warned that there was a rebellion coming. So they decided to strike early.
It's like asking the question, how did the Vietnamese defeat the reigning superpower, the United States of America? And part of that answer rests with the question of guerrilla warfare. That is to say, trying to avoid, whenever necessary, face-to-face confrontations of one military brigade facing another military brigade, but harassing the invading forces, who after all, oftentimes are not very familiar with the geography.
So there was a dinner that happened a week before the Bois Came ceremony. And actually, it's now, scholars say, that's where the rebellion was planned. So it wasn't like they planned it on the spur of the moment on the night of the 22nd. The main leaders sat down and planned a week before, maybe months before that, had their dinner. The crazy part about it is that the Europeans knew that their privileged slaves were meeting for dinner, and they didn't think anything of it. They were so utterly convinced that black people were never going to do anything about their situation. They could never overthrow them. They could never be defeated by a bunch of lazy, backwards niggers from Africa, that they got complacent.
How to be able to create bamboo, knives, how to have blow darts. You know, all of these things they used against these forces because these forces could not fight a guerrilla-type warfare.
So with the martial arts and the idea of the fighting, whether if we're talking about Brazil, capoeira, or the motions of if we go to a voodoo ceremony and you see how they work with spears in different ways, or we go to the Amazons and you see how it's applied, it's the philosophy, the genesis of it all is a form of worship where even if the slave master comes, it more looks like it's a celebration of parties and different things going on. So it's not intimidating. But at the same time, it forms a form of martial arts, a form of self-defense, where when it's time to rise for the revolution, the masters didn't even know that you was already training a bunch of troops and now you're ready to go.
Bookman wore on the colony and occupied more than a third of the colony. Every activity was stopped. Everybody had only one thing: find Bookman and stop this. And we had no weapons. They had the guns, they had the cannons, they had everything. And yet, the fear.
So Bookman, one of the great leaders, he was eventually captured, he was eventually killed. And when they got Bookman, they wanted to make an example out of Bookman so they could scare all the other people from rebelling. So the legend was they got Bookman's head, decapitated him and put his head on a stick and put it out in the public so that everybody could see it as a way to scare them. But at this point, people got rid of that fear of dying. So the rumor was people would walk past the head, see the head and say, they would rub their head and say, we're gonna carry on the revolution.
One of the fascinating things about the Haitian Revolution is how little pride human beings outside the African diaspora have taken in it, which is fascinating to me, because this is an event of universal human significance, the only successful slave revolution in the whole history of humanity. In all the millennia of slavery, they've been from Greece to Rome to the Ottomans to the Abbasids. No one's ever had a successful slave revolution.
The next Haitian leader, who would take the revolution to the next level was the great Toussaint Louverture.
He was raised by a woman from Dahomey. A lot of our people who were born here learned to speak different African languages and got the history of the places that whoever was teaching them came from. Toussaint might not have been from Dahomey, but being that the African woman who adopted him here was from Dahomey, then he's trained and raised as a Dahomean.
If you come from Africa, you have a militaristic aspect to your environment. Dahomey, as we know today, Benin, was one of the most warlike culture. That's where we get the term Amazon women, Amazon warriors, because of the women warriors of Dahomey. On television, they make you think Amazon women come from someplace else. But these are you go to Benin and you can go to the museum and see statues of these women and so forth, these women warriors.
Toussaint is born on May 20th, has a very different, even in slavery, their experience is very different. He was a submissive person in slavery. He had slavers who kind of like him.
It was believed that Toussaint Louverture had been free from the age of 45. We now know he was free from about the age of 30. So he'd been a free, privileged African, if you like, in as much as that can be the case in a slave society, for quite a long time before the revolution. He was heavily Christian, he could read and write, he was very Europeanized. And in many ways that determined his leadership, his experience of slavery, which was said to be, say, less harsh than someone like Dessalines, and his being free for so long. He constantly tried to placate or make peace with France.
Toussaint was an enslaved African who became a free African at some point in the process. I don't know whether he bought his way out of freedom or was granted manumission, because all of the slave society seemed to have put in place some process of manumission for the enslaved persons. And so he became a member of the French military. And he was the first African to become a general in the French military.
He became a great general. But what he's noted for is that before he even went into fighting, he made sure that his enslavers were off to America, okay, because he didn't kill them. And he always really had an affinity for the French.
He was operating in very difficult circumstances. I mean, it's not as if black people in Haiti had natural allies in the hemisphere. They had antagonists in the hemisphere. With regard to Cuba, which was controlled by the Spanish, that was an antagonist. With regard to Jamaica, controlled by the British, that was an antagonist. Of course, the United States was not altogether friendly. And then, of course, there was the French. And so he was maneuvering, aligning with one power against another power.
In 1802, Napoleon sent one of his generals, Charles Leclerc, over to Haiti so that he could try to bribe Toussaint into turning on some of the other Haitian leaders.
Early on in May 1802, he is speaking to Toussaint. He sent for Toussaint. Toussaint came, and in the room there were 2 chairs, a table. On that table, 1 million francs. And he said to Toussaint, "This money is yours." And Toussaint said, "Well, what do I have to do for it?" He says, "Nothing. Just bring me Dessalines' head." Toussaint put both his arms on the money, and he says, "If it is Dessalines' head that you want, you may as well cut both my arms right now."
He also develops a mindset that I'm respected as a French successful soldier. And so it was to his detriment that he thought that the military relationship that the French had for French soldiers would allow him to survive their imprisonment. And they don't apply that military standard to African peoples.
Napoleon understood that Toussaint wanted to get that respect from the French. Toussaint really wanted that respect. Toussaint really wanted to be accepted by the French military. Toussaint wanted to be accepted by the French elite class. And Napoleon saw that And Napoleon played on that.
So then little by little, Toussaint became the top guy here, period. Militarily and politically. And that's when he's going to do a constitution. He's going to have a constitution written and ban slavery. Of course, that was what brought his demise too. At that point, when Napoleon received the constitution that Toussaint produced here, he is vexed to the last degree and decide that Toussaint must die.
So Napoleon wrote letters to Toussaint inviting him to come over to France so they can negotiate, so they can talk. Napoleon stepped to Toussaint like, we're the same. We're French generals. We're French military men. We're French. And Toussaint fell for that, and when Toussaint went over there, they captured him, put him in jail, and he died in jail. Now, Dessalines would not fall for that trick. He knew how brutal the white supremacists were.
And of course, you know the sad story of his end, how he goes thinking that he's going to negotiate with his French antagonists, and they arrest him and bundle him off to Europe, where he dies, and where, of course, he utters the immortal words that his death will not stop the revolutionary process. And in fact, he was correct, because it's carried on.
In the course of fighting Leclerc, who was the brother-in-law of Napoleon, who had come down to head one of the armies, Toussaint get captured. I think this is 1803 or 1802, 1803, and then he's taken to France, where he's really starved to death. They said he died of maybe tuberculosis. They starved him to death. And that's when Dessalines assumed the leadership of the army. At this point, the whites, who had now been given a kind of a republican freedom, wants the black folks to go back to the plantation, go back to your status quo. And Dessalines said that's not happening.
So Napoleon is known for exclaiming that it wasn't so much the economic adventure. He said we have to stop the forward movement of blacks in the world. Because remember, when he got into Egypt, and Count Volney wrote his book, Ruins of Empires, telling the French and telling the world, the very same people that we are enslaving and at war with in Haiti and Martinique and St. Lucia and Tobago are the very descendants of the people who built the pyramids that we are copying all their work.
Sent his brother-in-law Leclerc with the new expedition in February 1802 with a clear mission: capture the 10 black generals, send them to France. And once you do that, you could slaughter the entire population of blacks on the island. Don't worry, Africa still has plenty. We'll go back and get more.
Jean-Jacques, at the end of the day, he didn't like the idea of like Toussaint going to France, you know what I mean? It was like, yo, I'm telling you, this is not gonna work out. But in the dungeon though, Toussaint always says something, and they teach us this at a young age. And these are not the exact words, but this is the meaning of it. It's basically, I'm in this dungeon, you could do whatever you want with me, but the seeds already have been planted.
Rochambeau was a French military general, famous even by the standards of 18th century slavery for his incredible brutality. So when the French realized they cannot win back the island from these rebellious Africans, they decided to embark on a war of extermination. That was the official command: just exterminate them and we'll replace them with new Africans. So to that end, Rochambeau was tasked with that extermination.
When we think about people being gassed as a form of genocide, the first thing we think about is Nazi Germany. But the first gassing did not happen in Nazi Germany. The first gassing happened in Haiti because the French knew that there was natural sulfur on the island of Haiti. So they got the sulfur. When you burn sulfur, it becomes poisonous. So during the fight, the French put thousands of Africans on ships off the shore, locked them in, and burned the sulfur, and the gases and the fumes killed thousands of people.
Most wicked, vicious, atrocious thing that ever walked on this island. If you wrote a book of 1,000 pages, you couldn't tell all the atrocities that this man performed here and with pleasure.
Rochambeau, French general, very well respected, very evil, very demonic with the tactics that he used. Napoleon sent him over to Haiti to carry out the genocide campaign. The thing about Rochambeau not only disliked black people, Rochambeau disliked all the mulattoes too. He hated the mulattoes even more than he hated the blacks. So Rochambeau was a real piece of work.
He came into that port and he didn't reveal what he was gonna do. And the people were really, really scared. And they held a festival for him. And it was a couple of days later when they were starting to feel, okay, this guy is not as bad as people have been saying, right? Then he invites them to this ball.
When Rochambeau came to the island, a lot of people didn't know what Rochambeau's agenda was. Nobody really knew anything about him at the time. So when he got to the island, people were kind of sitting back watching to see what he was gonna do. So Rochambeau announced that he's going to have a ball, this big party, this grand gala for all the wives of the mulatto soldiers. So at this ball, at this gala, they have this big, luxurious party where they're wining and dining the mulatto free women. You know, they got drinks, they got music, they got food. They're really partying and living it up. The French generals are there. The mulatto women are there. Everybody's just mingling, having a good time. So Rochambeau makes an announcement that he wants to have the women follow him in another room in the house. So he walks down the hallway with the women following him. The women are just, you know, going along with the vibe, going along with the program, going along with the party. They don't know what's happening. They're still giddy, laughing, giggling. Once they get in this other room, Rochambeau announces to the women, hey, I got presents for all of you. So there are these boxes lined up. And there's different variations of this story, but this is the most popular one. So Rochambeau has all of these boxes of presents lined up for the women. So the women are, you know, they're still in a festive party mood, but now they're confused. So they see these boxes and they see Rochambeau announcing that he's giving them gifts. So the women are like, okay, cool. So the women get the boxes, and when they open the boxes, they look inside and they see the decapitated heads of their husbands inside the boxes. So the women are terrified. Rochambeau's standing there laughing, giggling, just laughing his head off because he's letting them know, I don't care about the blacks or you mulattoes, and this is what I'm gonna do to all of you while I'm here. That move there made the mulattoes and the blacks come together as a unit against the French.
On the island of Cuba, for some historically unique reason, these dogs had been bred to chase down Africans. And in fact, some of those dogs were imported to North America to chase down Africans. And some of those dogs wound up in Hispaniola to chase down Africans.
And these are the dogs they would send out to chase down black people whose only meal was the flesh of black human beings.
Because one of the things European pseudo-historians have done is, one, said that the enslaved Africans massacred all the white people left on the island at the revolution, at the end of the revolution, which they did not. They massacred all the French, but the whites who fought with them, the Polish and the Germans, as it says expressly in the 1805 Constitution, were not only not killed, were now classified as black people. They killed all of the French left on the island, 4,000 or 5,000 people. But these are the same French who just embarked on a war of extermination against them. And remember, there were still French troops on the island. They were just on the other half of the island, what now is the Dominican Republic. So it's not like France stopped posing a threat the moment they got their independence. In fact, not only were French troops in the other half of the island, they were agitating in the other half of the island. So this is the context in which that massacre takes place.
That's basically what the Haitian Revolution was about. Africans dying bravely, whether it was getting boiled, whether it was drowning, gassed, shot, beheaded, burnt at the stake.
We had a culture where swording, fencing was a part of our culture. Lancing, using lances was a part of our culture. Going back even to South Africa with the Zulu nation. When Shaka took a long lance and created a short lance, he created both a spear and a sword. And so that's a part of African culture. going all the way back to ancient Egypt.
A lot of them had military training in African traditions, people freshly arrived from Africa. And then they had the military training of fighting for their different colonial master against another colonial master. But a lot of the tactics they used were what today we'd call guerrilla warfare. They didn't fight in the way, they knew they couldn't defeat a European army of 20,000 people, 80,000 people. They've got much less sophisticated arms, they've got way more arms, etc. in a face-to-face European-style empire versus empire battle. So they used guerrilla warfare, they used raiding techniques.
Primarily, what you have is the people who know their ecology. If you've been to Haiti, Haiti has a terrain of hills and mountains and plateaus, and if you are the African, you live in that every day. You plant there, you till the grounds there, you hunt there, and so you master that terrain.
The sisters, in many ways, supplied the force, created the environment for the men to do what needed to be done. Sisters are very important to any revolution. In fact, ain't nobody having a revolution without women. In fact, if you think you're doing that, it's just a fight. It ain't a revolution.
Sunny Belair, for instance, when they caught her, her husband was General Charles Belair, right? And he negotiated for her release. And you know, these white settlers, they never, you know, they betray whatever. They have no honor, okay? So when he gave himself up, they took both of them, okay? So that's Sanit Belair and Charles Belair, the general. And so they sentenced her to a beheading because she was a woman, and then they sent him to get shot. And she refused. She said, I will die the honorable way with my husband. They wanted to blindfold her, and she said, no, you don't need to blindfold me because I'm a woman.
When they ordered to take her head and put it under, they fought and fought with her and couldn't do it. And in the end, she gave the orders. Soldiers, position. Don't make me wait. Fire!
The Haitian leaders understood that it would not be conducive to them to try to get individual gains to the detriment of the collective society. So they were smart enough to understand, I'm not going to try to get little trinkets for myself while everybody else is suffering under this oppressive system. Enough of them understood that, because in any society you're going to have collaborators, but enough of them understood that we cannot collaborate with these white supremacists because it's not going to be beneficial to us collectively.
Yeah, the Haitian Revolution, the Africans are given a bad rep. These are people who were enslaved. As far as I'm concerned, if you want to own me and buy and sell my children, I'm well within my rights to do absolutely anything to get free from you. And I think all of us looking back 2 centuries hence can see that. If someone tried to sell your children, what would you do? You'd do anything you could do to stop them selling your children. And any self-respecting human would. Why should it be any different 2 centuries ago?
Toussaint Louverture opened the pathway for freedom and independence. But the man who doesn't get enough credit for bringing the revolution to victory is Jean-Jacques Dessalines.
Two different characters, 2 different people who handle things differently. 2 different spirits, I would say also. Because if we take it in our own worldview, in the Vodun worldview, when you analyze Toussaint, Toussaint is a Legba. Legba is the spirit that comes to open the way and trace the road. When you analyze Dessalines, Dessalines is an Ogu. That's the one who comes to make things happen by any means necessary.
But it's also really interesting how people like Jean-Jacques Dessalines become a military genius within the space of 10 or 15 years, with no formal military training in the way that we understand it. And that's one of the inexplicable things, but again, it comes down to human intelligence and the human capacity for genius and desire to be free.
Dessalines is definitely not Dahomey. I am certain of it. But it is a Dahomean woman who taught him Yoruba and taught him how to fight, how to do his Tantoya, who raised him. And not just any woman, it was a military woman, because Dahomey had 2 armies, a female army and a male army. And this woman was an officer in the female army of Dahomey when she was captured and brought into slavery. So she went right into work to raise some of the young ones that she, in a certain way, adopted. And Dessalines seemed to be her prized.
Tantoya is significant because she taught the greatest hero to ever live how to do hand-to-hand combat when he was a teenager, how to shoot. She taught him.
The use of arson, etc., you begin to understand how and why the Africans on the island were able to prevail.
At the end of the war, it was really bloody. And I think there was a point in time where Rochambeau had killed thousands, and he matched them, like head for head.
I mean, one of the raids I've learned about was a raid Dessalines undertook where they raided a French camp with just machetes. Now imagine Europe, heavily armed French camp, and a bunch of dudes.
And these were the skills they used to beat the French off them.
The Haitians had a certain resilience about them, you know, where they applied science a lot of times. And science is very strong, you know, so there's powders that are created, and these powders are not gunpowders, but if you spit it.
Decided now, liberty or death. They've decided they are willing to die for their freedom, and this is one of the most fascinating questions about any revolution, but about the Haitian Revolution in particular. What makes people decide at this point, we're now willing to die for an idea, but we weren't yesterday? And you see this behavior, you see people being burnt and tortured, laughing at it.
Republic, this thing was completely racial.
French writers, a lot of French writers were like,
oh, Rochambeau, he let him. And I think that's really.
And even though he got on the ship and out with Rochambeau,
the enslaved population, and he tried to bring about some form of economic justice in the period that he governed, and in my view and in lots of people's view, that was why he was killed by the other free people of color.
On January 1st, 1804, he declared Haiti independence. And the first sentence of our first constitution says, Haiti is independent from all powers of the universe.
Haiti liberated 5 South American nations, you know, from Venezuela, Colombia, all the way down. He liberated also the entire island, right? The Dominican Republic didn't exist.
Not only did Haiti get their own freedom, and this is what was so dangerous to the white supremacists, Haiti helped other Latin American nations get rid of slavery. Like Ecuador, it stopped slavery in Ecuador. They helped them get rid of slavery. They helped Venezuela get rid of slavery. They helped the Dominican Republic get rid of slavery. So that was a big fear of all the other Western powers, that this nation of African warriors were stopping slavery all over the hemisphere. So this is why even today they have to subjugate Haiti.
When Miranda came from Ecuador, he was trying to come out of slavery, and he had lots of problems. The U.S. was giving him trouble. He came here. Dessalines welcomed him.
And you can't trade. You are impoverished.
During the aftermath of the Haitian Revolution after 1804, there was a lot of sabotage by the mulatto class, because the only thing that's worse than a white supremacist is a wannabe white supremacist. And the wannabe white supremacists are the worst because they're fighting for something that they really can't be. So they'll sabotage anything for fantasy, and that's what they did after the Haitian Revolution.
It's obvious that the Catholic Church and the French conspired to kill Dessalines with probably the help of the Americans and the British. And so Dessalines was assassinated. He went to meet someone. No one knew who this was. They cut his body up. I was told into 13 or 14 pieces and scattered around the island. But that's where the women come in. Again, his wife Felicite, Cecilia, and other women got together and gathered up all those pieces, put that body back together in the manner that it was done to Osiris in the myth in ancient Kemet, and they buried him.
Napoleon was so powerful that he intended to take over the 13 states. He sent 2 units, one to the Louisiana Territory and one to Haiti. His intention was to attack the United States and take over. But because he had to use the units he had put into Louisiana to Haiti, when Haiti became independent, remember that trade had stopped because of the Haitian Revolution.
Then Christophe took over the northern part of Haiti, while Pétion took over the southern part of Haiti. Pétion set up a sort of a republic. Christophe made himself king, or was elected king over the northern area. It is Christophe that built this extraordinary citadel, the largest such edifice in the Western Hemisphere. No one has done anything like this.
But if you look at the citadel in Haiti, or Sanssouci, or any of the other military governmental fortifications built in the time, and you imagine this as a society run and govern.
That we know the waters, we know how they're coming, we know where they're going to come from.
Haiti was making her own money. We made our own under Christophe. We made our own gold and silver coins. Better yet, we did it so well. Colombia, Venezuela, several other
due to foreign exploitation. Without that foreign exploitation, the elite would not be in the position to be able to do the things that they have been and currently are still doing in Haiti.
So this also put a big fear in America's heart, that Haiti had the ability, right after that revolution, to send troops to South America to help free those South American nations from Spain. Then they were worried about the African American nation here, especially when you had a large population of. They said, you're paying us this for the land that you've taken from us, from the enslaved Africans who was working for us that you've taken from us, and the resources the land was producing for the French Republic. And so that's where that 150, which wasn't paid off until very recently, which kept the Haitian economy in a tither for the entire period of its history.
So we are a country that is being continually raped at every level, every time. If it's not an occupation, and anytime you see an occupation, you can be sure they do not occupy a country that has nothing.
I see a lot of similarities between Haiti and Detroit, because Detroit was the land of some of the most phenomenal movements of black people ever in the world. Marcus Garvey had a strong movement in Detroit. The Honorable Noble Drew Ali developed the strongest contingent and temple in Detroit. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad was a student of Marcus Garvey and Noble Drew Ali in Detroit. Malcolm X moved to Detroit to be close to Elijah Muhammad. And then, of course, you have the Motown sound.
Take the gold out of, they've got the technology to do now, and they are taking that out. They say we have 20 billion in gold.
And now Haiti is important because of its geographical location and its geology. There's oil and gas in abundance off of Haiti's shore. And so one of the reasons for the Clinton Foundations and these others to saturate Haiti is there's gold in them, there are hills, and there is oil off of those shores and beaches. And so Haiti is now under a new form of exploitation, which we are calling globalism.
The Clintons were put over, and their people who worked with and for their foundation, was put over managing the billions of dollars that came into Haiti for the rebuilding process. Well, they managed it back into their foundations and their bank accounts.
For the last 13 years in Haiti, the UN has been the cover for the Bushes and the Clintons to work together and extract the resources that we have. Haiti has $120 billion worth of oil.
The International Red Cross claims that they have received from people around the world $6 billion for the quake situation in 2010. Haiti never saw. We did not see 6 billion, we did not see 5 billion, we did not see 4 billion, we did not see 3, 2, or 1 billion. But somebody got the money.
The money is still controlled by the European. The education is still controlled. The institutional political structure is still controlled. And the spiritual structure is still controlled. That you have Africans in the French-speaking areas today who are readily prepared to say, je suis français, I'm French. And so that cultural dynamic of assimilation into French culture has helped cripple Africans.
Haiti is corrupted because 80% of a population, man, is living on less than $1 a day. It's corrupted because the lack of education. This is why this place is corrupted.
If you go to almost any store downtown and you get buy yourself a new suit, look inside and see where it was made. That suit was made in Haiti. Probably for, you're paying maybe $200, it was probably made for $25. The guy who made the suit may have made $1. And so, and part of that arrangement and contract that made, you can't unionize, you can't strike, and you can't ask for an increase in wage. Any of those can result in you losing your job or even going to jail.
Different times in our history, you will find that Haiti is forward in everything. In creating the OAU, the Haitians were the #1 people in doing all the papers and working and when everything, the U.S. was not in it, they refused to be part of it. And when we were a couple of weeks away from the grand opening, U.S. stepped in with money, bought itself in, and demanded that Haiti be not part of it.
About our brother. They started talking about his Yele Foundation, talking about corruption.
Like Yele Haiti was a patsy and a distraction for a lot of what really went down in Haiti. While everyone was trying to make Yele Haiti look like there was this big organization, you know, with the big celebrity face, like, you know, because when you hear the Red Cross, there's no face that go with it. All you see is Red Cross, you know.
And the first to bleed profusely, and that's the case for the Haitian revolutionary process. That is to say that they in some ways were sacrificial lambs for the rest of us. That is to say, by going up against the slave owners and inflicting this deadly blow on the slave system.
Historiography as producing ideas that were influential for humanity. The Chinese Revolution, the Russian Revolution, similar, all treated with respect. The Haitian Revolution, until very recently, I would argue the tide is changing, has been treated like some, you know, just niggas in the Caribbean rebelling, when actually it's arguably the greatest challenge to the dominant global order, as I can't remember which scholar said, in the entire last 200 years.
It's about capturing the light from what happened in the past, because that
out of Haiti to Africanize.
When I look at Haiti, I look at a people with a spirit, with a power, with a spiritual system that will never disable them. The God that they pray to will always look out for them. And sometimes you got to go through that to get where you need to get.
I think that with this current Trump administration, this spells